Good afternoon. I'm Warren Hoge, IPI's Senior Advisor for External Relations, and I'm happy to welcome you to this policy forum, co-sponsored by IPI and the UN World Food Programme, on the subject Resilience, Crisis, and Food Security, Path to Stability, the examples of Darfur and the Horn of Africa. Resilience can be defined as the ability to manage droughts, conflict, and other crises without suffering negative consequences and impacts. Individuals and households can be resilient, and so can national institutions and systems. Medium and longer-term investments that increase resilience have been found to be more cost-efficient than frequent humanitarian interventions, which may calm emergencies but end up doing little to address the underlying and increasingly recurrent causes of vulnerability and crisis. Transitioning out of fragility and crisis is a gap area that has not yet been fully explored, and the existing guidance on peace building contains limited reference to programming for food and nutrition security. In our discussion today, citing two examples, Darfur and the Horn of Africa, we hope to shed light on how investments in food and nutrition security can yield multiplier benefits, how they are also investments in early recovery, stability, and increased resilience for the future, particularly in communities at risk of natural disaster or repeated conflict. We have assembled a panel of seasoned experts, though I'm sorry to say that one person promised in your invitation, Nancy Lindborg of USAID, is unable to be with us. You had the full biographies of the remaining three panelists in your paper, so let me just introduce them here very briefly. Amir Daoudi is the World Food Programme's country representative and regional director for Sudan, overseeing one of the WFP's most complex emergency operations. Prior to taking that position in September of 2009, he was the director of the WFP Logistics Division, managing 2,500 national and international staff and maintaining oversight for the procurement and delivery of food to more than 100 million beneficiaries. He will begin his remarks with a 10-minute video. Sarah F. Cliffe is UN Special Advisor and Assistant Secretary General for Civilian Capacities. She is currently on secondment from the World Bank, where she was most recently the Special Representative of the 2011 World Development Report on Conflict, Security, and Development. She worked for 2 decades in countries emerging from conflict and political transition, including, and I'm now going to take a deep breath, Afghanistan, Burundi, the Central African Republic, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Guinea-Bissau, Ethiopia, Haiti, Indonesia, Liberia, Rwanda, Sudan, South Africa, and Timor-Leste. She has advised us that she must leave at 2 p.m., so if you see her depart early, it's not because of something somebody said. Marwan Jilani is the head of delegation and permanent observer of the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies to the United Nations. Prior to this position, he served as the head of the Middle East and North Africa Zone Office of the IFRC, based in Amman, Jordan. So let's go now to the video, and then afterwards we will hear from Amer Daoudi.
Roughly the size of Spain, Darfur has a population of 8 million people. More than half of them, about 4.6 million, used to receive WFP food. That was at the height of the conflict, when there were massive displacements. But the situation has changed, and the World Food Programme has to tailor its programs to support that change. WFP is increasingly shifting its programs to more targeted assistance, to build the resilience of the people of Darfur, so they can get back on their feet and need not rely solely on external assistance.
remains one of the most complex operations for the World Food Programme. Currently, we are assisting about 3.3 million people, of which half live in camps, and the other half are vulnerable residents who live in very remote villages across Darfur. Darfur remains a very unsafe place. Since 2009, 40 humanitarian workers have been kidnapped. And then there is ongoing conflict and banditry. And sometimes it's very difficult for WFP to reach all these remote places where we need to distribute food.
Despite the ongoing challenges of poor infrastructure, access, and security, WFP continues to provide food assistance to almost 3.3 million beneficiaries throughout Darfur.
7 years. I'm talking about somebody who was 10 years ago, 10 years, or 7 years, now 17. Therefore, somebody who has no recollection of anything else than receiving food. Therefore, since 2010, WFP started to look into this shifting from food aid into food assistance. In Darfur, we have critical food insecurity, the chronic problem of the environment, the chronic challenge of the rains, desertification. So Darfur is by itself a challenged environment to live in. On top of that, we have the security situation, which has just aggravated the whole relationship between humans and the environment.
Taking into consideration all these challenges, WFP has begun implementing programs to provide the tools, skills, and support to increase local production, stimulate markets, generate income, and build the capacity of the men, women, and children. While many people still depend entirely on general food distribution, in selected camps around Darfur, the World Food Programme has begun implementing a cash and voucher program, replacing WFP food with local produce brought by traders to the camps in a mobile market.
المواطنين بالذات مبسوطين جدا، هسه في زي الفول متوفره زي البلدي، حاجات بلديه كلها متوفره، عشان كده الناس برنامج ده عجبتهم شديد، في ناس فاهمين وواعيين بيتفاهموا معانا حسب هو ده تطبيقاتنا، هسه ولا بنعم حتى بيجيبوا لنا العسايد فطور، مره بيجيبوا لنا عصيده، مره بيجيبوا لنا يعني كويسين معانا خالص خالص.
سميتي تغيير كبير. الناس يعني حتى اسلوبهم فهم الموضوع، في البدايه كانوا مخوفين عنه ليش ما بيجي، اول شيء بدهم ما بيجي، لكن هسه الان بيقولوا مساعدة عنه هو زول عنده قروش او نقود، كله ده باعتبار قروش، يختار الحاجه اللي هو دايره ونفسه وحبه.
At the height of the crisis, food aid helped keep the cereal markets alive in Darfur. As the situation stabilized, however, WFP could start reducing food distribution, allowing the farmers and traders to fill the demand.
مع انه طبعا امكانياتنا ما كبيره خالص، لكن بنتعامل مع الناس وكده، لو حصل الست معاه ممكن نمشي حالنا.
At the end of each market day, traders submit their vouchers to WFP, who pay directly through bank transfer. The food voucher program is achieving its goals, giving people the choice to buy their preferred local food, empowering the beneficiaries, and strengthening the markets and traders' capacities. But for most internally displaced people, finding work to provide for their families is still an ongoing challenge.
كم تمشي تخسر القوي، كم تبش ورث، كم تبش، لكن ما في، كم تريد ما في صعب، أمل ما في، أمل هنا ما في يعني، أنا كان مستنى أول زمان نشوف والفاشل، يشتغلوا نجلوا لقوا أطفالنا بيجوا في الشوارع، يا جيل جيتار بيا دقا، يا فاد مسكاه وجعراز ويقول لك سي هاي دقا وحاجات يعني كثير إشكاليات، عشان كده علينا هسه بقينا نقول أنا بسيط المسخن هنا.
To help women generate income, WFP, in partnership with the Network for Women's Development, consisting of 57 smaller community-based organizations, have set up safe access to fuel and energy centers around Darfur.
أي شخص يتعلم بعمل له قانون واحد، ما دام عملت قانون واحد تاني بعد ده تمشي تتعلم بيدك هنا وترجع السوق تشتري القانون ب 5 جنيه يجيب لك العائد انت تستفيد من العائد تعيش بأطفالك. القانون مقتصد خالص، البيت فيه حبة من الفحم تشتغل لك أي شيء وبعد ما خلصت الفحم الفضل بسيط تدفيه كان برجع اليوم الثاني تولي.
The consumption of less wood is protecting not only the environment, but the women, who used to travel long distances at risk of violence to collect firewood. Originally a project aimed at building fuel-efficient stoves from locally available material, safe centers have quickly transformed into platforms for much more. Women from neighboring villages learn to make fire-fuel briquettes, nurseries, tree plantations, while also receiving training in nutrition, adult literacy, and hygiene. Selected women are promoted to become trainers themselves, so they in turn can train other members of their community.
ونستفيد منه. يلا مركزنا دي الشغل لنا ما بينتهي ثقافتنا احنا في مراكز متجاوره حلالات شجر الجوز ونواحي رقاب يشيلوا البذور حقنا ده ويمشوا قدام عشان ما يعملوا القاعات زيهم زينا نحن يكونوا مستفيدين من ناحيه التعليم والبيئه والثقافه.
ربطت بعد بقينا كويسين زي في الفيلا كلها دايرين نمشي مشتى نعمل في الاشجار عاي قال كوكو بكره نعمل عاي نجي توالي نعمل قاعدين نعمل زي ده.
المرأة في دارفور، المرأة في دارفور هو المرأة الأطفال، المرأة بقى هو الأم والمرأة بقى الأب وفي قاعد يلقى المرأة تفتش الأكل للعيال، يفتش الشراب للعيال، المرأة يوم كامل شغال، الراجل ما بيجيب حاجة إلا المرأة، بس الشغل ده لو كان الرجال ما بعملها إلا النسوان.
لأنه الرجال ما في عمل الراجل بياخد دمها.
كي بلا بلا كشتينا
بلا بلا ما مسوين. أنت أماني ما
Women are extremely powerful when they are given the tools to be powerful. They really drive their children and their men. They create a stronger community. We just have to give them a bit of training, a bit of understanding, and they start creating by themselves.
Food for recovery projects being implemented by WFP through partnerships with community-based organizations are providing incentive and support to women and men who take part in the creation of community assets which contribute to their livelihoods, such as tree planting, agricultural terracing, and water reservoirs.
ذاته ما بحفظ كرامة الإنسان، أظن لما نشتغل بضراعة وياخذ أكل ده بحفظ كرامته. السنة دي سنة صعبة صحيح، الناس بحطوا للسنة الجاية.
كله كان شغالين لكن شغل بعيد، شغله بسيط بسيط، أنا دول ما عنده مروءة، ما عنده يقول لك بيشتغل بسيط بسيط. هاي لكن لما جاء إيش؟ مروءة بقى كثير الناس يشتغلوا كويس. هاي.
الطرق جاء طلبات من المواطنين نفسهم، يعني روى احنا بنقدم مثلا التطوير بنقدم الغذاء والإغاثة وكذا، وهم قالوا برضه احنا برضه محتاجين لمساعدة زي الفلوس، زي السكوت، زي الحفاير الشامية، وعندنا اقتراحات الكثيرة بواسطة ناس مختصين سواء كانوا زراعيين أو مهندسين من هو بدأنا في البرنامج. حقيقة احنا تقربنا تخرجنا لكن يدوب تقربنا. لأنه أول حاجة قلنا تعليم وتعليم بس، لكن حاسس إن إحنا تعليمنا في شنو؟ تنفيذي في مجال العمل، يعني بيعمل. السنة الجاية ده إذا كان غريب جاي نقول زاد ما نتائج هاي. زاد ما نتائج. بالضبط. هاي في هذا الوقت إحنا الثلاثة تبليغ وسيكر وأنتم مواطنين تشتغلوا.
The World Food Programme continues to provide food to millions of Darfuris through general food distribution and other flagship programs, such as school feeding. But since WFP began shifting their strategy 2 years ago, 1.2 million people are no longer in need of WFP assistance. Community-based organizations and networks have substantially built their capacities. And universities and local governments are now conducting research, monitoring, and evaluations together with WFP throughout Darfur. Based on these successes, new interventions continue to be introduced, supporting and creating links between the projects, providing a holistic approach to addressing the challenges of food security in Darfur.
Amir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here and address everyone here on the situation of Darfur. Let me start by saying I understand that Darfur has not had a good story for quite some time. It's a doom and gloom images, the press, the reality on the ground, and the challenges we face. So that actually exists. But today's reality is, some time back, 2 or 3 years ago, we've decided to start piloting our operations and shifting a little bit from relief into early recovery. I am happy to report that today 30% of our throughput in Darfur is actually early recovery focused. And we are planning to increase that gradually over the next couple of years. Our experiences have indicated that where there are chaos and crisis, there is opportunities. And one does not have to wait until the other is complete to start. We can actually do that where opportunities exist. I want to highlight one thing, that our experience in Darfur has shown that the best partners we have on the ground are the women. What you saw in the video is actually the real picture. You go around the camps, you go around the villages, the men are playing cards, dominoes, or smoking shisha. It is the women who are doing all the work. And we saw an opportunity there to empower them, give them a stronger hold on the income and the management of the house at the household level. Of course, present company exempted on the sense of the men not doing any work. Actually, it's probably my staff who put that in the video on purpose. I just want to highlight some of the things, our focus on the early recovery activities in Darfur. And it basically circulates around increasing local production, empowering women in food security, facilitating knowledge and transfer through training and on-the-job implementation, stimulating markets and market integration, building national capacities in food management and security. I'm talking from a field perspective. So if I am politically incorrect, I'll have the hat of the field on me. So for us, building resilience means moving from managing crisis to managing risks. And that has been our focus. The examples you saw are primarily from North Darfur, where we have used North Darfur, relatively speaking, because of its stability, a bit more access than we have in the other Darfurs. And from there, we start reciprocating in the other Darfur or replicating the types of projects. We have started with a small number of targeted safety activities and slowly built around the safe projects and everything, many other activities. And we increased building the civilian capacity in the sense that we wanted local solutions to local problems. So what we do is we bring the community together. Women, we push for 50% representation of women on these committees. We bring the academia world. We bring from local governments such as Ministry of Health, Ministry of Agriculture, and the like. We put them together. We discuss the issues facing that community or a group of villages. And together, they come up with the solutions that needs to be done in order to graduate them from our assistance. And we start the projects like that, giving them ownership of their projects. So other than the SAFE projects, which actually has mitigated against the risks that women were exposed to, where they had to go back and forth daily, on average, 10 kilometers, plus or minus 7 miles a day, to collect firewood. So other than the environmental impact, we had also the risk for the women: harassment, attacks, and rapes. We've seen a massive decrease in using these safe ovens, and also the briquettes, the stoves and the briquettes, and the use of local materials to manufacture these. This also helped us build around these types of centers the ability to start training women on best hygiene practices, because malnutrition is not only an issue of access to food, it's actually hygiene practices. Helped us build agro centers to train farmers on best practices of farming and what can be done. Today, I'm happy to report that in Darfur, we almost have 1 million trees planted, and these range from gum arabic, which is a major cash income for the population in Darfur, and it's a commodity that is always in demand worldwide, as well as jatropha, as well as fruit trees, in addition to tobacco, which is a very good cash crop there. We've helped them with access to water, building terraces, building water reservoirs. These have enabled the community to have 3 months extra access to free water. They don't have to pay for themselves, their animals, and also for irrigation. And this is collected from during the rainy season from the rains. As we are progressing, we are going to be expanding these types of activities. What I want to basically focus the presentation around is what we're doing is basically a WFP type activities, basically dealing with the local community, empowering the local community and giving them the ownership. But it needs to go beyond. I believe that if we all come together, the cost effectiveness of these types of intervention is shown in every WFP budget for Sudan over the past 3 years. We've had our funding increase over the past 3 years. We have achieved almost 34% savings in our overall costs. So partnership is important, not only with the local community, but we need additional partners on the ground. Darfur, it is a reality that Darfur is very challenging and very tough environment. As I speak to you, one of my staff and colleagues has been in captivity for almost 70 days. And he is held by some bandits, and he was taken from the middle of Nyala in South Darfur. But that's not going to deter us from continuing to try and access more and trying to reach more people with these types of interventions. On average, WFP in Darfur access monthly between 350 to 400 food distribution sites. Our voucher program is generating income into the local market, increasing local agricultural production, and we are linking all those activities together. Where the farmers are producing, they're able to sell their produce to the traders. We give the vouchers to our beneficiaries. They go to these traders to get the food. So we're basically creating markets for production, to increase production. We're pumping in cash into the local community rather than importing the food. Of course, we are very careful on maintaining and monitoring all these activities, but as well as market prices. This year has not been a good year in terms of agricultural production and rainfall. So we are going to be stopping our voucher program in July, which is the lean season, and resuming it back again in November, but also scaling it up to almost 700,000 beneficiaries. I believe we need to continue expanding these activities. Actually, over the next 6 months, all the experiences we've learned and we've done in North Darfur are going to be spread now gradually to the other 2 Darfurs. We need partners. We need to have the international community continue believing in these activities. It does cost less. And I agree with the study that was made by IFRC and others on the fact that we see money coming in into an emergency, and then the moment that emergency is over, early recovery and development takes a back seat. I believe maybe we should try and change a little bit the technique where we can do the emergency, and while we're doing the emergency, we can start immediately getting into an early recovery activity. These are some of the ideas, and I'm sure there will be a lot of Q&As on that, so I will stop here. I want to thank you again, and I'll yield the rest of the time.
Excellent, Amir. We'll certainly have time to come back to you, but I'm glad now to get to Sarah Cliffe, because she does have to leave early. Sarah?
Thank you, Warren. This is a real pleasure to be here on this panel, because the example that we've just watched in the video and have talked about is such a good example of a shift in UN approaches towards building more sustainable civilian capacities. That resilience is really crucial for a couple of reasons. Of course, it provides resilience against future food shocks or drought or other types of impacts on communities, but it also has a key link to conflict. So we know that societies that have stronger institutions, whether at national or local level, also tend to have less likelihood of food shocks or natural weather events, increasing the likelihood that they will have social unrest or social conflict. So in that sense, this institution building is critical. The example that we've just looked at is excellent, I think, from the perspective of the kind of shift that it shows in approaches. So we were just talking before the panel started about what we would have seen if we looked at some of the major programs in prolonged crisis situations over the last 3 decades. And I think we would have seen quite a different thing. We would have seen, of course, programs that saved lives, and that was an incredibly important impact, but very often programs that were run by importing from abroad, essentially. By importing, of course, food and direct support, but also by importing the staff and the people who ran the programs. The problem with that approach, or the drawback with it, was that even when you had humanitarian programs stretching over many, many years in prolonged crises, They saved many lives, but they didn't necessarily leave behind them an institutional legacy. And I think of what we have just seen, there were several aspects to the design of that program which are really worth reflecting on as lessons for how to leave behind that kind of legacy. The first would be the movement that was described from broad to targeted assistance and the use of vouchers rather than direct distribution, because both those aspects, of course, make sure that the delivery of direct food is not undermining farmers and traders who are then unable to produce as they normally would and to take their goods to market. So the use of those mechanisms means that you can provide targeted social protection and support, but do it in a way in which the local markets and local traders can actually increase their activities, which is crucial for the longer term. The second aspect that I think was very important was the work with community organizations. And this is perhaps particularly crucial because in addition to what it does for the people involved, and there were some, I think, very compelling stories there of the impact it had had on some of the women involved, it also creates some sort of governance space in a place where there have not always been such good examples of governance at a local level. So to see activities operating where the community are involved, women are involved, they're transparent, people can see how money is being spent, that's a great example to build that can be useful in later recovery. The last aspect that I think wasn't touched on, but I'm sure is an element of how the programme was designed, would be the involvement of local staff in this sort of situation, which can also actually provide a very important source of training for people who are then a stock of expertise for their society going forward into the future in other institutional contexts. So I want to keep my remarks brief, but just to say that I think this was a very useful example in lots of different aspects of how we can combine short-term humanitarian objectives with longer-term institution building.
Thank you, Sarah, and we'll go right to Marwan, if you please.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Warren, and thanks for IPI for hosting. Okay, now I think it's on. So thanks. I will complement the previous two speakers and the example we saw from Darfur by giving an example from Kenya, which is another area that was hit hard last year by one of the driest years on record and the worst drought that it has seen in 60 years. So within the northeast area of Kenya, we have seen some oases of hope, where crops were growing, where people are feeding themselves and are food secure. Surplus harvest has been sold to pay for life's other essentials. Formerly destitute pastoralists dependent on food aid are among the success stories. The Kenyan Red Cross has worked to empower them to irrigate, supplied them with tools and seeds and other agricultural inputs, and they have also trained them in modern feeding techniques, including vital non-rain-fed practices, disaster risk reduction, also providing them with medical outreach and health education programs. The Tana River Drought Recovery Project, which is the example I'm referring to, has turned life around for those farmers who used to be one of the poorest in Kenya. For more than 10 years, recurring drought and destructive flood has exacerbated poverty. Some 77% of the district population were living below poverty line, and more than half of those were unable to meet the basic needs of providing food to their families. Relief and other assistance were all that sustained them, while their plight was reflected in their poor state of health, particularly in that of mothers and children, including an infant mortality rate that was 60% higher than the national average. Farmers in 3 communities were assisted to expand their cropped land, and 1,200 acres were plowed and harrowed for them. Tons of seeds and thousands of seedlings were distributed, and irrigation pumps were supplied in order to better utilize water from the nearby Tana River. The Kenyan Red Cross, in collaboration with the Ministry of Livestock, also restocked the most affected households with modest but viable herds of goats and sheep. Close to 60% of families within the project now have animals, and 26% sell animal products, with goat's milk being the biggest seller. So for the communities, sustainable livestock means both nutrition and income. Such communities also need access to clean water for their health. Poor health indicators linked to poverty are a contributory factor to drought turning into a disaster. Avoiding illness during disaster can best be achieved by being healthy beforehand. So breaking the cycle that leads to poor health is intrinsic to breaking the cycle of poverty and drought. Despite being modest in nature, these interventions underline the value of long-term investments in sustainable solutions alongside emergency relief. This good practice shows that building resilience is possible. Building resilience is critical to reducing the impact and severity of shocks, as well as the ability of individuals and communities to bounce back and recover. Indeed, long-term investments in food security and resilience building can be highly cost-effective, have a profound impact in terms of saving lives and securing livelihoods when disasters does strike. IFRC understanding of resilience takes a comprehensive and integrated approach to reducing risks and strengthening capacity. It is in part about bridging the development and humanitarian approaches. Working in resilience mode comes with an understanding that the level of vulnerability to disasters and shocks is often determined less by the scale of a disaster or a shock and more by the underlying vulnerability of the affected community. Resilience programming, therefore, involves sustained engagement that is explicitly participatory, inclusive, and accountable to the affected community. Our work to strengthen resilience is based on the following principles. First, people first. A people and community-centered approach understands that resilience is not something we can do or bring to the affected individuals or communities. Rather, our role is to facilitate and assist individuals and their households and communities in their own efforts to strengthen their resilience. Local ownership, as has been emphasized by the previous two speakers. The focus on building local ownerships, assets, capacity, as well as a link with local government and actors so as to avoid fostering dependency or substitution. There is a need also to understand that diverse underlying causes of both vulnerability and disaster and crisis risks requires holistic assessments and interventions, and increased cross-sectoral cooperation and partnerships in program implementation, as well as more tailor-made programming. Acknowledging interdependencies, there is a need to address underlying causes of vulnerability and prepare for and respond to disasters and crises throughout the overlapping phases of disaster management and linking closely to developmental programming. Long-term perspective, to engage and invest for the long term, and working with partners, understanding the importance of working in partnership at the local, regional, and the international level. The last principle is to know the limits. We have to acknowledge also that strengthening and sustaining resilience is not possible in all contexts at all times, sometimes due to access or resource issues. Even in these contexts, we need to ensure that intervention is not undermining resilience and rather contributes, even if at a small scale, towards resilience. In conclusion, I just want to refer to a recently meeting organized jointly by IFRC and the African Union Commission, where they emphasized what has been referred to as the twin-track approach to provide relief assistance and invest on the long term for building the capacities of the communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Marwan. I just want to comment on something that Amir said at one point. You were almost apologizing for the view from the field. I just want to tell you, there is nothing we like to do more here at IPI than to put people from the field on this stage to talk to people who presumably are from headquarters. I go back to my own experience as a foreign correspondent. I spent half my life arguing with the headquarters in New York, and so I know the value of the view from the field, and we're very happy that you are all here with your experience to talk to all of us about it. That said, there's a moment, and I think we still have Sarah for a few more minutes. If any of you have any questions, please raise your hand, and comments. I would like to get this discussion going with more than just those of us here on the panel. Excellent, over on the side. If you just wait for the microphone and identify yourself, please.
And if you can stand also for photos. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Asma Shalabi from UNDP. Just a question on Darfur, and to what extent you've been cooperating maybe with the peacekeeping mission? Is there any initiative on their side to do similar work?
All right, here comes my field diplomacy. I have to be very honest. We do cooperate, but it leaves a lot to be desired. We need a change of approach as the international community, as the humanitarians, and as peacekeeping. We need to also realize that we cannot continue hiding behind lack of access, lack of security, banditry, and the like. Darfur is the size of Spain. If the north of Spain is having problems, we cannot come and say the rest of Spain is inaccessible. As I said, WFP and its partners reaches on average between 350 to 400 distribution sites monthly. We're the only agency that has offices among the humanitarian community outside the three capitals. We have 11 offices outside the three capitals with international staff in it. Working with the community-based organizations actually not only gives them ownership and everything, but also for us as WFP, as international staff, helps with our security. The community needs to get to know us. The people we serve, they need to get to know us. And we are seeing improvements on our security. They protect us. And I think that Darfur has mesmerized the world with the conflict and the doom and gloom that it remains in many people's mind as an emergency operation. And when the World Food Programme's largest program, and it is the largest in Sudan, 30% of it is going through early recovery activities, it says something. And I'm hoping by next year and early this time next year, we'll be at the range of 40 to 45%. So there is a lot of work that needs to be done there, and WFP cannot do it alone. We need others that have more experiences, probably can take it more beyond early recovery into development type activities. And we need these kind of partnerships. I hope I've answered your question.
Very good. I think we have a social media connection here.
Yes, hello. Hi, I'm Bettina Lüscher from the World Food Programme. I want to say hello to all of the people who are watching us here on webcast, and we have gotten some questions from Twitter. One of the questions from William Lambers, who is very interested in our work, is he is wondering, he would like to know the impact of the drought and poor harvests, particularly in North Darfur. How difficult is it? What is the situation there at the moment? Is it still as bad as it was a while ago?
In the rainy season runs from July, depending on where you are in Sudan, up to October, November, in the north, in North Sudan. And last year, it was not as good as the year before. The year before, we had what we call a bumper harvest. It was below average in comparison to the previous year. But taking a 5-year average, it has been within the range as an average rainfall. For us in Darfur, and that's a very good example of the fact that our programs are actually progressing even through a bad rainy season. We have not seen an increase in the need of our food assistance. Actually, we carry out quarterly a food security monitoring system. It's an assessment that is done jointly with the academia, with the government counterparts, and with the local community. And we have not seen an increase. In 2011, we used to assist what we call seasonal assistance, which is during the rainy season. And our assistance 2010 was around 5 months. We've reduced it further to 3 months as the local conditions improved. And now in 2011, many communities that we used to serve, we're only providing 2 months of food assistance during the lean season. Additionally, I have a policy that the humanitarian community and the World Food Program is not the answer for all. I have asked and insisted that the government assumes its responsibilities. There is a grain reserve that the government has. So my answer oftentimes to government officials, local or the governors at the states level, when they ask for additional assistance, I say, you have the food reserve. Tap into that. So we're trying to remove the reliance and the expectations that we, the humanitarians, will come in and answer to any problem. We're shifting that mentality. It's not easy, but it's working, slowly but surely.
I'll come back to you for more. I think you have one that, could you? Erin?
Thanks. Erin McCandless from the New School and Journal of Peacebuilding and Development. I think we can see that resilience has the potential to be quite a unifying principle across many of the different sectors. I mean, and phases, whether we're looking at recovery to humanitarian recovery to development or stabilization to peace building, and of course that means also the potential to be the source of a lot of turf wars. So I'm wondering how we might be thinking critically to try to avoid or escape that so that it can actually be a unifying principle to promote more integrated approaches around the concept. And secondly, I'm wondering if you can say a little bit about the methodologies that are being developed to assess resilience, to identify resilience within individuals and communities. I know that on the peace building side, certainly we've been looking at what are the capacities for peace for quite a long time, and that's a very interesting alternative to just looking at drivers of conflict or sources of fragility. So to be looking more at the positive side and how do we begin to identify those. So maybe you could say a bit about that. Thank you.
Do you want to comment before you go?
Just to say something on the question about resilience as a unifying principle or a possible source of division. I actually think we're finding that the focus on resilience and on national institutions rather than international activities only is unifying for the UN system and other actors. So if we take for a moment the attention off what are the activities of each individual part of the system or agency, and put the attention on what are we doing to leave behind institutions that actually function on their own. That tends to create pressure and incentives for different parts of the system to work together. So Amer raised one of those issues. You have, for instance, the relationship between peacekeeping missions who are normally in a country situation for a shorter duration, but who also very much have it in their interest to try to support the space for national institutions to grow and flourish, because that's what prevents us from having to do repeated interventions of the type of external peacekeeping. So in the end, it always takes some work towards, because different parts of the system come from different approaches and a different mindset vis-a-vis how they relate to local institutions. But I actually think it's a principle that can work to bring together rather than to divide.
Yeah. Please, Marwan.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, I think there is a growing acceptance of the concept of resilience among the humanitarian and development communities, and an emerging consensus, focuses around the capabilities of the local communities and the focus on the local communities' abilities to withstand shocks and to recover quickly and to be able to even build better after a shock or a crisis. I think we haven't yet reached to the point where we are systematically using resilience as a tool to measure our programs or to assess our programs and to assess our interventions in building the resiliency of communities. But there is a growing work among different organizations to start doing that and to build their programs based on the concept of resilience. We know that a number of aid agencies have adopted that concept, have been pushing a number of organizations also to expand on this and to work on the basis of the concept of resiliency. And we also have seen it being adopted at the policy level by different actors. So we're at the beginning of elaborating this as an important implementation tool.
Okay, in the back.
Good afternoon, Frank Williams, World Vision. I'd be interested in comments from the panelists concerning the enormous investment of private capital coming into Africa, particularly capital targeting food production in the millions of hectares of land. That's the official numbers. Millions, if not tens of millions of hectares of land being leased and in some cases purchased. And obviously this is a kind of a good news, bad news scenario, and what are some thoughts by the panelists on this development? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'll take this one. It's exactly as you said. It's good news, bad news. These types of investments, unfortunately, in Sudan, for example, these types of investments, whether sovereign types of investment and or private, geared to only feed the hungry machinery in the country that is investing. It's not geared for local consumption. So this is going to affect producers who have traditionally sold to these types of countries. Of course, when you see many countries coming with very sophisticated machineries, very sophisticated agriculture inputs, and so on and so forth, it also has a byproduct by spreading the knowledge and spreading techniques that can be applied to increase local production. I think the jury is still out there, but I'm a bit wary about it, especially when I see it in the context of a Sudan North and or in South Sudan even, for that matter. So I will wait to see the results of that.
Anything to say, Marwan?
Well, I agree. I just very quick reference also in relation to the recent summit in Washington. I think there has been maybe a too much focus on private sector and on the private farming to address the issues related to food insecurity, at least for Africa. And in the eyes of many of the humanitarian and development organizations, this constitute only a small part of the problem. There are other issues related to financing, for example, related to, again, building the capacities of the local smallholders. And we focus as part of the resilience concept also. We think focusing on small farmers is the way to build resiliency. So,
excellent. One more?
One more from the Twitter community. Somebody who knows about that we do school meals all over the world and considered as an important safety net in crisis situations. So one of our Twitter fans wants to know, how many children receive school meals in Darfur? How many could receive them? And is any of that food locally sourced? Goes to you, Amer.
is a signal in this room. In Darfur, we currently provide 600,000 school children with meals on a daily basis. We also provide almost 650 under fives with our blanket supplementary feeding program. There is a potential for us to reach more, especially in the outlying villages. How much of it is locally produced? Where possible, it's a WFP mandated policy. Where we can buy locally at a competitive rate without impacting market conditions and all contributing to inflation and the increase in prices, that is the first option. Our hope that instead of buying in Sudan for Darfur proper, through our voucher programs and through other mechanisms, we will soon start buying even within Darfur for Darfur. One of the agreements that we sign with traders is we insist that depending on market conditions and the production locally, we insist that the food should be procured from within the area rather than bringing it from the east where the major production, agriculture production is. So as much as possible, without having any negative impact, we insist on local production. I just want to highlight one thing that we tend to overlook in terms of investments in the countries where we serve, be it in an emergency situation and or in an early recovery or both simultaneously, is the transport sector. Now I'm putting my hat, my previous hat as a director of logistics. One of our primary goals in WFP is to ensure that we build the capacity of transporters, local transporters. I remember in 2005, I was sent to Darfur to help with the transport problems that we were facing then. And at that time, plus or minus 5 major big transporters were basically doing 90% of the business for WFP at the peak of the operations. We decided to take that further, whereby we decided to promote local transporters. Today, I have in Darfur 34 transporters that actually pick up the food almost on the border of Darfur globally and move it to all different locations we need this food in Darfur. That's a local Darfurian capacity. In addition to the Khartoum big transporters that move from the ports or the production areas into these locations. The capacity that we have built over the years was a capacity that has been used even by WFP and commercially to transport cargo, commercial cargo, from the north to the south. Until the last problems between the north and the south happened, that was a major transport routes north, south, and backwards. So this is an investment that we do, and that's another capacity building that we do as a byproduct of our interventions.
Amir, can I ask you a question? I was last in Darfur in 2008 when I was traveling with the Secretary General as a reporter. And of course, the big issue of those days was security. As you talk about, for instance, having the 35 local transporters, as you talk about the distribution areas, the 3 capitals, are you, and also the film pointed out in the very beginning, the video, the hazards that humanitarian workers face. Can you just bring us up to date on that? Is that, are you able to function better now than you did 2 or 3 years ago on a security basis?
Between 2007, late 2006 and end of 2008, and again, this is relying on my previous job, we had many of our trucks, both commercial or our own fleets, attacked. Some of our drivers were killed. Many of the commercial drivers were killed also. And that led to an increase in the transport prices, delays in deliveries, and the like. So one of the things that we had to mitigate against is what we call escorts, where the government provides escort. Now, this is not the best solution, but you have to imagine in Darfur, you travel days on end. It's a no man's land. Just going to give a small example. Last Tuesday, I went to visit one of the camps or one of the villages where we're doing some of our early recovery activities. And from the location where I started to the group of villages, it's 11 kilometers. 2 hours going, 2 hours coming back. 11 kilometers. So other than the topography of the land, you have the security element. By having Darfurian transporters, that enabled us to reduce the risks because they knew which roads to take, they knew what's going on, when to travel and when to park the truck for a couple of days and not move. Funny enough, sometimes the government relies on these things because it gives them an indication there might be an attack coming here or there might be something going on. So you see how this in Darfur. So you resolve one problem, there is another issues. There is, as we tried and we slowly moved from having attacks on our convoys and the like, we started having the spat of kidnapping. So they said, okay, we cannot attack trucks now, so let's attack humanitarians. And as you saw in the video, 41 of our colleagues, NGOs, UN agencies, and UNAMID have been taken hostages. And one of our colleagues is still in captivity, as I mentioned earlier. So it's shifting sands, it keeps moving, the problems keep, or the challenges, I would say.
We have another tweet.
One here from a former Marine who now is a cook and a social activist. That's an interesting career path. He loves his son and helping others. And he says, once again, it's Sudan where the women are under siege. Give us a little bit of your sense of hope. Why are the women so crucially important and why are they our biggest partners? Some of the anecdotes maybe that you have seen in your many years there on the ground.
Okay. Back in the 90s, I was young in those days, I served in Sudan, in South Sudan, out of all places, actually, Abyei. So a lot of my colleagues say the problems of Abyei is because I served there some 15 years ago or 17 years ago. When we did the food distribution, you will see immediately, because the holders of the ration cards were the men. And immediately you will see, we will hand that 12 kgs. We used to do it in the old days our way. You fill up the bag or whatever they have to carry, and immediately you see it on the market, where they go sell it for cash, and with it, they buy local produce. So depending on the WFP distribution, local produce, I mean alcoholic local produce called Araki, which is like Jet A1. If you drink it, don't smoke. You will light up. But it was around these times that you will see more people having had a little bit too much to drink around some of our distributions. When we started with empowering women, gender, and the like, we started seeing less and less of that. We started seeing actually an improvement in the food security at the household level. Professionally and personally, and from my experience in WFP, I believe women are much better managers and leaders. With all my due respect to all my colleagues, again, present company exempted. So, our best partners today in Darfur, in what is perceived also as a very conservative Muslim community, has shown that the improvement of food security at the household level, their ability to manage the cash they resource and the savings they have, has actually contributed greatly to the food security at the local level. The shock we had of the bad rainy season of last year, today the proof is in the pudding, where we do not need to increase our food assistance or our general food distributions, because the heads of the households, the women, are the ones who are managing these things. They are the ones who are working, and they are the ones who are managing the income. It's actually, I would encourage all of you to try and come, if you get a visa, first of all. Second of all, if you get a security clearance, to come and visit us. So the invitation is there. We will welcome you to see it for yourselves. I'm a great believer in that. I believe that we need to continue to empower women. Women leadership, the first lady you saw is actually a woman trader that was talking about that her relationship now with the beneficiary is very good, where they bring her breakfast and they became good friends and everything. Believe it or not, she's one of our biggest partners as a trader in all of Darfur. We are pushing for more like her. So unless the men in Darfur get their act together, stop playing cards and started assuming responsibilities of their livelihood, we will continue to push for more and more partnership with women heads of households.
Are there, by the way, the women complement in the World Food Program there, is it substantial? Are there lots of women there in uniform from your office?
I have too many of them. That's why they said men don't know. Actually our record on gender is excellent, and gender balance in Sudan. My deputy, who you saw, she's my brains and one of the best colleagues I've ever worked with, Corinne Fleischer. She's been there for 5 years in Sudan. And many of our heads of units, until recently we had our head of Jilani, which is West Darfur area office, a female colleague, a Canadian female colleague. So we do encourage that. They tend to communicate even better with our beneficiaries in terms of dealing with our women beneficiaries. But I tell you one thing, you go to Darfur, the women there have no problem in expressing their opinion, whether you are a man or a woman or otherwise. They have no problem in expressing their opinions.
Now, I was struck by that in the film, how openly they basically made fun of the men, which is a way of sort of showing how empowered they're feeling right now. Maureen Quinn?
Of women, just a little further. I'm Maureen Quinn here at IPI. I'm wondering, in the film, and I'm glad to hear you say that one of the woman is a trader. Is it in the camps, in the communities, in the villages? Have a lot of the men left? Have they gone off to jobs in the cities or looking for, income-earning activities outside of what is a conflict? Have they gone to fight? And particularly when you kept saying women heads of household, I thought, is there a segment of the population that has left?
This is a problem that we are facing in Darfur. As was stated to me in my many long hours negotiations with camp leaders and drinking plenty of tea, somebody sometime went around promising $10,000 per person as a compensation for the conflict. Would like to know who that person is, and would like to meet that person. That is, literally speaking, wherever you go in the camps, remember, the 3-point-some million people that we assist, 50% of them are in IDP camps. The rest are either residents and or people affected by the conflict. So there is what I call seasonal return. The men sometimes leave, they go. During the planting seasons, they prepare the land. When the harvest comes, they harvest, but then they go back and sit in the camp. We have been working, and that's Darfur, We've worked with the government where we wanted the government to assume responsibility on doing returns properly. We had the agreement where they will pay for 50% of a return. We wanted to pilot a real return, where the people in South Darfur, in a town or a locality called Gereda, which came to the news just 5 days ago, or 8 days ago, had the headlines, was where the IDPs actually in reality wanted and showed interest to us to return. So we said, okay, what do you need? They said, we want the schools to continue. We want the medical services, the health center. We want water and the basic services. We said, right on. We got the government to agree to fund part of the expenses, especially some of the capital expenses, to commit to provide a health worker, a teacher, and to recruit the police, the community police, from the IDPs themselves, from the villagers themselves. Believe it or not, the month of June was the month where we were planning to kick-start that pilot, whereby we said we'll bring our 2 other offices, North and West Darfur, to watch this. WFP will provide food for work for the community to build their school, build their health clinic, and the other types of infrastructure for 6 months. And then they are on their own, they farm their land, and so on and so forth. Just last week, that particular town, which never attracted anybody's attention, got attacked, taken over by some rebel group for 48 hours, while we had our office and our staff there. And now it's back in the hands of the government, so everything is a bit on hold. So the return is seasonal, but the reality tells us today, if you go across Darfur and peace and security is there and everybody loves each other, in reality, we don't expect more than 40% to actually return. The reality today that in many of these urban IDP camps, we have a generation that is very much urbanized, and many people don't want to go back. They have jobs, they have access to building, plumbing, and the like. Trading, we provide in the camps what we call milling vouchers. So many of the IDPs now own mills where the beneficiary, instead of trading part of their food to be milled, we give them the voucher, so they take their food, provide the voucher to the miller, they mill the food, and we pay the IDP cash in return against that voucher. So you're seeing a lot of urbanization and settlement. As of August, we will complete what we have done for almost now 2 years, the verification exercise where we will have and biometric, and we will know our beneficiaries exactly. That will be the kickstart of what we call camp profiling, where basically we're gonna go to the level of the household and say, you, my friend, don't need any of our assistance because you're able to work, you have access to the labor market. You, on the other hand, you need probably more of our assistance. And that parallel to a track of availing opportunities for return, hopefully, over the next 2 years between 2013 to 2015, our strategy is to go back to the levels of assistance to the pre-conflict of 2003, 2004. We hope. We'll probably slip a few months here, probably a year, but that's where we're going. And we've been gradually going through that over the past 2 or 3 years. I hope I've answered your question.
Jeffrey Laurenti.
Jeff Laurenti with the Century Foundation. Mr. Daoudi, in Sudan, what is the share of the donor contributions you get as in-kind food? Because the video showed the heavy sacks with USAID branded on them, surplus food stocks. What share is cash? And when you go to, in effect, a quasi-cash distribution through the voucher system, what becomes of those surplus food stocks? Are they competitive in that marketplace? And then you just made reference to the camps one camp having been briefly taken over by a rebel group. What is the presence of the Sudanese government in the IDP camps? And do people see that as, well, they're actually doing something for us, or is it totally invisible?
What you saw is, because I was expecting Nancy, we have a European version. If we're doing this presentation with the European Union, you'll see European bags and the Japanese bags. No, I'm just kidding. Our global requirements for Sudan, almost plus or minus 40 to 45% is in kind. And that we are very grateful for, because it helps us stabilize the market. It is not every time you can buy. I'll give you an example. Last year, we had aimed to buy almost 100,000 tons in Gadaref in the east, the food basket of Sudan. The prices of sorghum in Gadaref town were more expensive than if I bought wheat in the Black Sea, shipped it, loaded it on trucks, and moved it all the way to Darfur. And we did not buy, because what we call the import parity, we compare the prices from origin all the way to the destination with the prices available at the local market. The remainder of our budget comes in cash contributions. Some carries certain restrictions. But as we are progressing and we're showing evidence on the ground, we're seeing that donors are willing to overlook some of these restrictions, and they're lifting that restrictions. Even, and I have to give credit to USAID, because they have been a traditionally in-kind donor, but now we are seeing them giving cash contributions to many operations around the world for WFP. So that trend is building up. But you still need the in-kind, because one of our leverage we use with our traders in Darfur is, hey, my friend, you start hiking up the prices, I flood the market with my in-kind. And we have our warehouses there. And we saw that a couple of times. When we saw that the prices are going up, we said, no more vouchers. That month we're doing in-kind. And prices dropped. So, we have to keep in mind that Darfur still is an emergency. And that helps us respond to many crises. When there is a conflict between two clans and or government and rebels, there is a displacement. So we provide immediately emergency ration for, depending on the situation, 2 months, 1 month, or 3 months. And then we say, but we don't register them as new IDPs. In terms of government presence, in the camp, inside the camps, no. Outside the camps, yes. But you never know if they have them in, you never know. So there is no presence of government officials, especially police or army or whatever, within the camps.
We have time for one more question. Paul Mikoff.
Thank you, Warren. Paul Mikoff from World Vision, an agency similar to WFP and #1 partner in, I suppose, all 8 areas in which WFP evaluates partnerships around the world. Thank you to the panelists. Now, as Sarah Cliffe told us earlier, the experience from Darfur and elsewhere is obviously a development and an improvement, significant improvement to prior paradigms and models. So we need to celebrate that. And we are celebrating. However, one cannot but conclude that in the final analysis, it really amounts to simply perfecting our various ways of managing crises, not resolving those crises. I mean, Darfur has been a protracted crisis for how many years now? And it's not the only one. The Congo, Somalia, the Horn, and elsewhere. In other words, is there anything that humanitarian agencies like WFP, my own, and many others, could do in addition to what those who should be doing that first and foremost, Security Council and others, to actually begin tackling the issues at a fundamental level? Because unless Darfur and Sudan or the Sudans are tackled at the political level, at the level of governance, at the level of economic growth, social affirmation and development, etc., we'll be putting out fires forever. We might be perfecting those models and paradigms. In the final analysis, will not be solving the issues and resolving those crises. I wonder if there could be a brief reflection along these lines. I realize it's a complex question.
And Marwan, if you'd like to say something, this is the last moment we have to talk.
Well, I think I'll take it from two angles. Let's say one relates not only to conflict, but in general relates to disasters and crises. And in terms of how we relate, the different phases on the continuum of response to recovery, to building back, and so on. I think there is, as we have said and we have seen, there is a growing consensus relates to understanding the importance of preparedness, the importance of building resilience, of focusing on long-term investment on the policy level. This is not matched in terms of being translated into funding and in terms of funding decisions by the aid agencies. Although the rhetoric is there, but the decisions to support preparedness, to support resiliency is not yet there. And if you look at the percentages of support, it's still focusing overwhelmingly on the response capacity. If we have an emergency, a high-profile emergency, we will have support for it. There are so many underfunded emergencies that do not attract the attention of the media. They are forgotten crises and forgotten emergencies which are not tackled. So this is from the angle of disasters in general. In terms of conflict, of course, I mean, obviously, if you do not tackle the root causes, we will still continue to deal with the symptoms. We will continue to deal with the impact of a continued crisis. And we have in the world, we have so many of these that we have been running assistance and relief operations for decades and decades, some of them for 5, 6 decades. And obviously, we all know that the solution, the long-term solution, is the political, addressing the political roots of the crisis. But that's beyond our, as you know, it's beyond our prerogative.
Mm-hmm. Can I just say, yeah.
Please.
I tend to disagree. I think there are many good examples where sometimes we humanitarians, we undermine our leverage. Sometimes we can drive a political solution. When I first arrived in Sudan, I went around talking about we need to get out of this relief issue. Otherwise, I will have exactly what I have on the eastern side of the border, refugees that have been there for 30, 40 years. And I was told Darfur is a political problem, so unless there is a political solution, you don't venture into that. I'm not usually a guy who follows instructions. So we ventured, very small, a $2 million in a program that is around $600, $700 million plus or minus, $2 million investment. And with that, we've shifted 30% of our portfolio into early recovery. We can do a lot, but yes, I agree with you. Many of these problems that we confront are politically motivated and requires a political solution, but we don't have to wait. We need to start, and we need to actually find local solutions, because sometimes we humanitarians like to come in with our preconceived ideas. We know what's the problem, and here it is, fit into this dress or jacket or whatever. We found through our experience in Darfur that local solutions to local problems. One of the colleagues, I don't want to put him on the spot in this room, came up with an idea when he was still working with me in Sudan of having the Dinkas and the Masiriya go into a joint project. Imagine. Now, all the peace efforts have not been able to get them on the same table, but the Masiriya and the Dinkas got together to work on building water reservoirs in South Kordofan along the migratory routes so that they don't cross into each other's lands. This colleague is actually in this room, but I'm not going to put him on the spot. And I thought this is not going to fly, but go ahead, try it, let's see. And it did work. So sometimes we really need to bring our feet to the ground and leave the politicians. I heard today a term in in New York, in a meeting, something, what is it, Pedro? It's above my pay level or something?
Grade.
Hey, grade, yeah. So I don't believe in that. I believe sometimes the solutions are bottom up rather than top down. And we need to continue investment. We cannot lose hope. We've seen evidence of our work, and we need to continue being. So I'm ever the optimist.
My congratulations to the unnamed colleague. I won't point him out because I think that's a wonderful example for a session dedicated to the idea of resilience and how you achieve it long term. Thank you both very, very much for having been here. Don't forget to get your free memory sticks from WFP outside.